As I have said at other occasions, as a recovering politician, I'm on about step 9, and an enthusiastic welcome like that always presents the danger of a relapse, so I'm on my guard. But I came here because I have made a series of speeches about the policies of the Bush-Cheney administration with regard to Iraq, the war on terror, civil liberties, the global environment, and other issues. A series that began more than 2 years ago with a speech at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco prior to the president's decision to invade Iraq. During this series of speeches, I have tried hard to understand what it is that gives so many Americans an uneasy feeling that something very basic has gone wrong in our democracy. There are many people in both political parties who worry that there is something deeply troubling about President Bush's relationship to reason, about his disdain for facts, his incuriosity about new information that might produce a deeper understanding of the problems and policies that he wrestles with on behalf of the country. One group mistakenly maligns the president as not being smart enough to have a normal active curiosity about separating fact from myth. A second group seems to be convinced that his personal religious conversion experience was so profound that he relies on religious faith in place of logical analysis. But I disagree with both of those groups and reject both of those cartoon images. I know President Bush is plenty smart, and while I have no doubt that his religious belief is genuine and that it's an important motivation for many things that he does in life, as it is for me and for most of you, I'm convinced that most of the president's frequent departures from fact-based analysis have much more to do with right-wing political and economic ideology than with the Bible. And it is crucially important to be precise in describing exactly what it is he believes in so strongly, and then insulates from any logical challenge or even debate. It is ideology and not his religious faith that is the source of this troubling inflexibility. Most of the problems President Bush has caused for this country stem not from his belief in God, but from his belief in the infallibility of the right-wing Republican ideology that exalts the interests of the wealthy and of large corporations over and above the interests of the American people. It is love of power for its own sake that is the original sin of this presidency. The surprising current dominance of American politics by right-wing politicians whose core beliefs are usually wildly at odds with the opinions of the majority of Americans is a dominance that has resulted from the careful building of a coalition of interest groups that have little in common with each other besides a desire for power that can be devoted to the achievement of a narrow agenda. The two most important blocks in this coalition are, first, what I would call the economic royalists, those corporate leaders and high net worth families with vast fortunes at their disposal who are primarily interested in an economic agenda that will eliminate as much of their own taxation as possible, and an agenda that removes regulatory obstacles and any competition they might face from smaller, newer firms in the marketplace. They provide the bulk of the resources that have financed the now extensive network of foundations, think tanks, political action committees, media companies, and front groups capable of simulating grassroots activism. The second of the two pillars of this coalition are social conservatives, many of whom want to roll back most of the progressive social changes of the 20th century, including many women's rights, social integration, the social safety net, the government social programs of the progressive era, the New Deal, the Great Society, and others. And their coalition includes a number of powerful interest groups like the National Rifle Association, the Anti-Abortion Coalition, and other groups that have agreed to support each other's agendas in order to obtain their own. You could call it the 300 Musketeers, one for all and all for one. And indeed, those who raise more than $100,000 are called not musketeers, but pioneers. Now, Bush's seeming immunity to doubt is often interpreted by people who see and hear him on television as evidence of the strength of his conviction, when in fact, it is this very inflexibility based on a willful refusal to even consider alternative opinions or conflicting evidence that poses the most serious danger to our country. By the same token, the simplicity of many of his pronouncements, which are often misinterpreted as evidence that he has penetrated to the core of a complex issue, are in fact exactly the opposite, because they usually mark his refusal to even consider complexity. And that's a particularly difficult problem in a world where the challenges America faces are often quite complex and require rigorous, sustained, disciplined analysis. The essential cruelty of Bush's game is that he takes an astonishingly selfish and greedy collection of economic and political proposals and then cloaks them with a phony moral authority, thus misleading many Americans who have a deep and genuine desire to do good in the world, and in the process he convinces them to lend unquestioning support for proposals that actually hurt their families and their communities. Truly, President Bush has stolen the symbolism and body language of religion and used it to disguise the most radical effort in American history to take what rightfully belongs to the American people and give as much of it as possible to the already wealthy and privileged. And these wealthy and privileged look at his agenda and they say, as Dick Cheney said to former Secretary of the Treasury Paul O'Neill, "This is our due." The central elements of President Bush's political as opposed to religious belief system are actually plain to see. First, the public interest is a dangerous myth, according to Bush's ideology, a fiction created by those hated liberals who use the notion of public interest as an excuse to take away from the wealthy and powerful what they do believe is their due. Therefore, government in this system of belief, government of, by, and for the people is bad, except when government can help members of his coalition. Laws and regulations are also therefore bad, again, except when they can be used to help members of his coalition. Therefore, also, whenever laws must be enforced and regulations administered, it is important in their view to assign those